Hi, Karen. And the timer runs down. Good evening, everybody. I'm just kind of the space buff kind of guy that I was. Timer counting down always meant that the shuttle was going off. I remember seeing my first shuttle launch back in like what 1980, 81 when Columbia leaped into the sky. And as a teenager, a young one at that, with a brand new telescope, and who watched the Apollo Soyuz and stuff, I countdowns have always imprinted on my head, and I was like numbers, and who knew I would end up in meteorology and then kind of liking economics on the side. But that's just kind of way the fate dealt the cards to me, and so that's how we played with them. I loved numbers, mathematics, and then and economics. There's always something good in there. Care always something good in there. All right, what happened today, Thursday, kind of the biggest day going on this week weather-wise, was that the National Hurricane Center has issued their forecast for hurricanes. We'll get to the specifics of those in a moment, but they kind of may be leading the, let's just say, the season off with, or let's just say the models are giving us signals that it's going to be active out of the gate. Hurricane season begins 1 June. We've already had Arthur. There are signals that we'll have another before the end of May, and that would be a little more unusual, not just one storm, but possibly two named storms by the end of May, and we get into the official season. So that would be something we're looking at. Hurricane Tracker app over on Twitter. If you wanted to follow me, it's at Weather Wars info. Model data. This is from the Euro ensembles, and I'll tell you, those Euro ensembles are more accurate than the American models. I'm sorry, they just are. They historically are good, and the states, because we have been deficient in funding the Weather Service, the Department of Commerce, NOAA, and some of these modeling divisions, our hardware is not up to date. So, in a way, we're behind the curve, and the Europeans and even the Canadians, to a degree, have some things on the American model system, although we've probably been doing it longer than just about everybody. Hey, Vicky, Tracy, and Karen, you are the early arrival. So what we're seeing is tropical development, a very strong signal showing up for the end of May, early June in the Eastern Pacific and or Western Caribbean, because we have seen these signals. We have seen storms develop in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and then cross the Central American Isthmus, that peninsula, that isthmus, and then emerge into the Pacific. It doesn't happen, but it likely will. And if we cross the remainder of the Pacific, we begin to see a greater signal showing up in the Indian Ocean. And there are some signs that that dipole, that Indian Ocean dipole, is coming alive. So we've already had an incredible storm in there making landfall. We'll look at some video of that very shortly. Probably spend a little more time on the Twitter just because the stories are visual today than usual. 2 years ago, we launched a new satellite, the States did. And you can see this is the new bird and its resolution, that we can get so much more data, and the frequency coming down that we can have these pictures updated is every 2, every 3, every 4 minutes, depending on how the satellite is tasked. So they can isolate a part of what they call a floater, or zoom in on a part of the globe, and then just scan it every minute, every 2 minutes. Scan the thing while it still does other scanning of other frequencies in the background, versus what we had available from the GOES 13. This is Hurricane Irma in both instances, I believe. Yeah, there it is, Irma up in here. So we've really made some just some incredible leaps in satellite imagery in the last 20 years, and even more so in the last 10, as circuitry and storage on board and communications is just really blowing up. Wildfire in southeast Colorado, that's showing up right in here. These satellites are just giving us that kind of a resolution that we can see that pyrocumulus cloud last night on the plains of eastern Colorado, just over the mountains from where I am located right now. The cyclone crashed through. Boy, I don't know if I know if I should try Purba, into Burma last night, or Bangladesh, and again, heavy winds, a lot of rain. An old man winter is not quite done yet with the Pacific Northwest and those northern Rockies. As we can see, these are the probabilities of 4 inches or snow or more through this coming Saturday night. So, as we talked about yesterday and the day prior, that some of these ski resorts, especially the Teton Village, and Yellowstone, may yet be in for another snow. It's not a guaranteed event, but there's something going to happen up in those northern Rockies. Spectacular imagery of a rapidly organizing depression moving towards Western Europe today. And here's we've got the UK, we've got France over here, the Iberian Peninsula with Portugal, and then Spain and France. So this guy, as it begins to continue to wrap up and migrate towards the United Kingdom, will bring about incredible winds. That's probably what they're going to get largely from this as we move into this weekend. All right, a convective pulse will transit over the Atlantic and Africa during the first half of June. We're looking out a good distance in the models, and we have dozens of variations on a model that give us an average solution. They call it the mean, MEAN, and those means they tend to use rather than individual solutions. And it's still, once again, signaling we're going to get kind of active in the Caribbean and also off northwestern Australia and through the Indian Ocean. The signal also is giving us a little bit of a hit. Something Twitter is doing. Twitter is adding a no features reply. I think this guy's saying it's going to be a disaster because it'll get people's opinions go unchecked. That's kind of like what YouTube does with their no replies options on their videos. So somebody can post something and then there's just no minority report, no secondary option showing up. So as we look once again into Colorado, it's kind of that same fire, but with the heat enhanced. So the fire is enhanced, and I'll be curious to see how that plays out today. And actually, what we'll see tomorrow is probably the burn scar, as those very dry vegetations will reveal where the fire has moved across. Okay, from the Weather Channel, the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season is expected to be more active than usual. So says NOAA, with total named storms. They are anticipating between 13 and 19. That is a rather broad range. CSU, Colorado State University, anticipating 16. Now, their department really got its notoriety from Dr. William Gray. And, he passed very recently, but he still has left quite a memorial and quite a strong department to deal with tropics, the tropical forecasting. And the weather company, which is the IBM, the Weather Channel, WSI data systems, they're under that conglomerate now, that mega corporation, anticipating 18 in their private forecasting with named hurricanes approaching 9, which falls in kind of the range for that. Today, we're seeing the severe weather showing up southwest Kansas, northwestern Oklahoma, and Jeff Petrowski, this guy who actually I got to know when I was working in Tulsa all those years ago, back in the early 90s. Jeff was just kind of a young guy, a contractor, and would head on into these storms, and his vehicles would come back wrecked. I even recall one time his insurance company saying, "Jeff, sorry, man, we can't cover you anymore. It's just not going to happen. Go do all your chasing, but we're not replacing any more windshields." So you just don't, yeah, that just becomes a cost you've got to bear. And this is something that's going to be significant, is the Weather Prediction Center, the 1 to 7 day QPF, how much rain will fall. Now, these have been very dry places. We got an update from the Drought Mitigation Center, the Drought Center out of Nebraska, and we'll look at that shortly. And look at these places through Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, up into the Northern Plains, even to the Rockies with the snow happening now, and then a little bit into the North Carolina. But it is this area that has been dry. That is going to be a blessing and a curse because they're so dry, and I'll show you what the downside will be in a moment. Born on this date in 1792 is French engineer, mathematician Gustave Gaspard Coriolis. He described an effect of motion on a rotating body which now bears his name, the Coriolis effect, or the Coriolis force. The Earth's rotation deflects the wind to the right in the northern hemisphere and then to the left in the south. This rotation gives us tides, gives us winds. It is fundamental to keeping a body's circulation active, is this Coriolis effect. That is key. All right, let's hop off to weather. Current temperatures much cooler in Texas today. The Southwest a little bit warmer and still cold with that last storm rotating through the northern Rockies, and then cool through much of the eastern third to two-thirds of the nation, as that deep storm that brought the snows to the upper Midwest last weekend still is in place and still keeping things cool. More rains and snows across the Mountain West, and then those severe storms we're looking at in this location. This is the water vapor imagery, with the yellow is the dry air, the white and green are clouds. And if we were going to look at chemtrails, as we talked about yesterday, those were showing up earlier this morning in the eastern side of the Gulf Coast. And there's your rain. And I want to pop in and look at the severe weather, where we do have the tornado watches, or at least severe thunderstorm warnings going on in yellow. No tornadoes. When we do get to green, however, we're beginning to see some flash flood warnings, where these storms have been rather slow movers. Lightning, one would expect to be associated with those, but I'm going to pop over to this guy, where western Oklahoma, southwest Kansas, as we mentioned, have been so dry. And yes, we do need some rain. But one of the things that caught my eye was that there are portions of southern Louisiana that had 10 inches of radar estimated rainfall. Areas of Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, particularly West Texas and Southwest Oklahoma, did not receive any of this rain, and conditions continue to deteriorate. Portions of western Oklahoma have had all winter wheat zeroed out, as producers did not get a crop to grow and even did not see enough growth for grazing purposes. So that's the problem for these farmers. And now with these kind of incredible rainfalls coming, let's pop over the QP. Let's not even do that one. Let's come over to here, where we can scroll over and see some of these forecast values, where 8, 9 on some locations in Southwest Texas, 10 and 11 inches of rain may fall in the lower Rio Grande Valley, where it becomes an issue of too much. It's just too much, where we have gone from so dry to wet, too wet to replant. I mean, what do you do as a farmer sitting at the end of May with that kind of water coming? How do you recover? Is there anything that you could possibly do? And that's a question that we're going to begin to ask ourselves more frequently, as the climate crisis, whether you believe it's driven by carbon dioxide and by greenhouse gases, or by issues from the sun, doesn't really matter. Climate is changing. And it needs to be, I would say, if I was in a position of leadership, that we would open up all proprietary data, because almost all climate research is proprietary. Databases are not opened up largely to scrutiny. Peer review simply has the paper to look at, not the databases from which the solutions were derived. The models used to run the data through to come up with the conclusions, not open sourced. So if I was in a position to where we had to deal with, and I would anticipate that, because we've seen so much press about it lately, that every scientist would contribute equally, that we would simply open our books, we would all go through each other's data, look for the problems, look for the solutions, and then write fresh models to address the issue. And if you've got open source data, then it's much easier for a group of scientists to come at a solution and to write the model with the data that we have available and continues to come in. So I think there's ways to really figure out if we're going into warming or cooling. We don't even literally know what the forcing value of carbon dioxide is. We just keep getting read this line that it is, well, let's just say that carbon dioxide is such a simple molecule, it can't hold heat. It can't hold heat. It may be able to reflect it in theory, but we still don't even have any lab exercises to prove that that's the case. And then it's so well mixed in the atmosphere that we don't end up with this layer to where it can truly act like a blanket, like clouds behave. So there's a lot of if, ands, or buts out there when we come looking at these solutions, and they really, really do need to be addressed very soon. We've got the Earth's population, its demands on the environment are at a crescendo, and we've got to have a way out of this problem that we have been and willingly boxed ourselves into. Okay, guys, that's kind of what's going on for the day. We'll talk about that climate issue as as it was has gotten a little press in the last 48 hours about the grand solar minimum that is underway. It's recognized that it's underway when we've had 76, 77% of the days without any sunspots. And there's plenty of examples through history that when that happens, the energy coming from the sun is on the decline. How deep it goes, nobody knows. All right, everybody, Scott Stevens here, and we'll catch you in the morning with the Coffee Break Show on this same channel at 10 o'clock Mountain Time while Vicky continues to work on her projects. Thank you, Vicky, for all you do, and Tracy for all your inspiration, and Risa for showing up for all of these shows. You're amazing people. All right, everybody, keep looking up. Have a great evening, and see you tomorrow.